gather around. If you thought Roswell, New Mexico was the first alien crash, I have information to inform you. My name's Kerry Trent, and this is Wheels of the Past. That's a phrase that I say a lot these days because I do a television show out of Pittsburgh on antique cars with great stories behind them. We did the Bonnie and Clyde car out in Nevada last year. We went down to Gibbsland, Louisiana there in that shot and filmed where they were executed, where they actually just made the new movie, The Highwaymen. That's us in Primm, Nevada, with the actual car Bonnie and Clyde were executed in. This is us at the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, where we did an episode on a Trinity site where the first atomic bomb was detonated on a Packard that was found a few years ago in a junkyard that actually took the scientists from Los Alamos to Trinity Base for the first atomic bomb test, and the detonator for the bomb rode in the car with them. We did a nice little interview at the National Museum of Nuclear Science History in Albuquerque. John Dillinger, America's most wanted criminal in the 1930s. We did an episode with his 1933 Hudson Essex terraplane. We filmed to begin with in Little Bohemia, Wisconsin, where they shot up the place in 1934. From there, we went to the Biograph Theater in Chicago, where he was executed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 1934. And from there to Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, where his original 1933 Hudson Essex terraplane rests at the Crime Museum in Pigeon Forge. Tom Mix, America's first Western star. We did an episode in Murdo, South Dakota with his 1931 Packard. Christine, America's most known Plymouth Fury. We did an episode with a couple of years ago right here in Kentucky where Christine was on display at the Night Risers Con in Elizabethtown. We did an episode here a couple of years ago at the Corvette Museum where the floor fell in. We did an episode with the Munster cars and Butch. Patrick, let's everybody give Butch a big hand. A couple years ago, we went to Mahwah, New Jersey and met with Butch. And Butch was good enough, thank you Butch, to give us a nice interview for an episode of the Munster cars. We did an episode in Evans City Cemetery where George Romero filmed Night of the Living Dead on GTOs. We found Howard Hughes's 1940 Cadillac in St. Louis at a car museum, where we did also Steve McQueen's 1950 Hudson convertible. So why did an antique car lover decide to write a novel on UFOs? As a kid, I read all the books at the time involving UFO landings and the Roswell stories. But strangely enough, I'd never heard of the Aurora, Texas crash. I thought the possibilities for such a story were so great that it was the perfect opportunity to create something profound. Reported in both the Dallas Morning News and the Fort Worth Observer of the time, numerous stories of the event had been handed down through generations. Some accounts claim it was the most astonishing thing that ever happened in Texas history. Others claimed it was a lie made up to try to save a dying town in serious trouble due to fire, crop failure, and an epidemic. The good people of Aurora, Texas today feel certain the story is true because at their local cemetery stands an official monument documenting the event. Placed there by the Texas Historical Society in 1976, the inscription tells of a spaceship which crashed nearby in 1897, and the pilot that was killed in the crash is buried here. During a cross-country filming trek in March of 2019, we visited the site in which I kneeled to pay homage at the unfortunate alien's grave, only to go on and visit the Aurora City Park, where a tribute is now to the crash has been erected. My novel, Traveler, is based on the Aurora, Texas crash of 1897 and was conceived in the summer of 2015, much to the help of this pretty face, my co-author, John Cochran of Odessa, Texas, who was originally an outlaw biker in his younger days, and who the Toombs character in the novel is based on. But before we get to that, let's go back to the beginning. About the time the cast of The Lost in Space were lifting off in the Jupiter II in 1964, I was born in the little northeast Georgia town of Commerce, Georgia, located directly between Atlanta and Greenville, South Carolina. To this day, divided down the middle of the road by railroad tracks, which are still used by freight trains night and day. In early 1973, the town suffered one of its worst. Gosh, I don't know where my slide went. Here we go. A rash of UFO sightings reported throughout the South began in 1973. Now referred to as the Great UFO Wave of 1973. Sightings during the time were at all-time record highs across the country, as bizarre appearances of unexplained craft fill the skies throughout North America and across the world. In September of that year, a three-man TV crew out of Atlanta captured several minutes of footage showing strange, bright colored lights hovering above the city. 1973, just by coincidence, happened to be the same year in which Jimmy Carter, former president, made his own UFO report, stemming from a 1969 evening event where he and a group of 20 other prominent individuals witnessed strange green lights in the western sky before they disappeared out of sight and out of mind. June of 1973 also happened to be the same year in which there was a reported sighting of a flying saucer that landed in Danielsville, Georgia. Danielsville, Georgia, a mere 12 miles from our home. As unexplained sightings of bizarre crafts in the sky continued, a string of calls flooded into local police departments. resulting in numerous nighttime chases by various law officials. Across Georgia and the U.S., UFO reports became all too frequent, causing chaotic scenes right out of Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters. Police cars began chasing through the night sky after flying saucers. My dad worked at a one-room police headquarters in Commerce, Georgia, as a radio dispatcher for 19 years. He also kept a realistic brand scanner CB radio by his easy chair at home. There have been lots of chatter on the local radio by county and city law officials for months of almost nightly activity. Then one evening it all came to a head as reports of a flaming object had landed in the vicinity of the local hospital came over the airwaves. The very same hospital my mother worked at just across the street from. So away we went in her 1969 Oldsmobile panel station wagon as fast as we could go. On arrival, we found several police cars whose occupants had heard the same reports, as well as one police car and a fire truck. But much to everyone's disappointment, there was no flying saucer resting comfortably in the front of the medical center clinic. Yet there was something truly astonishing in the far corner of the parking lot. A large, discolored, smoking circle, no less than 30 feet in diameter and still blazing hot, obviously produced from something that had landed, radiating immense heat. And all around its circumference, hundreds of bright, shiny, molten drops that had melted into the asphalt. The round mark there is exactly where the craft had landed. An object had set down, then quickly lifted off again. In the short time, calls had came into the police department. Now this wasn't some jackass making phony crop circles with 2x4s in a wheat field. Nor was it some fool taking pictures of a silver painted plate dangling from a string. This phenomenon had happened in my sleepy little hometown and was laid out right in front of me. And from that moment on, I became a firm believer in the enigma of UFOs. But that's not where the story ends. Oh no. 2 days after news traveling throughout the region and folks coming over to gawk at the burnt spots in the parking lot, an asphalt crew was quickly moved and quietly moved in during the middle of the night. Now bear in mind, this is 1973. And under the cover of darkness, the entire parking lot was covered up. Or in this case, shall we say, covered over with several inches of hot black asphalt. I had an elder lady whose husband witnessed the event. They were just coming out of Coram's restaurant, our local restaurant, served catfish and cube fried steak, and her husband and his fishing buddies were coming out of the restaurant and saw the craft come overhead and head that way. She said that For years after that, people just dismissed him as nonsense. But he and his buddies saw the same craft that I saw. They have been, they are, they will be. That sort of sums it up. That was the title of a 1974 Kolchak the Night Stalker episode in which reporter Carl Kolchak also discovered a visiting craft from another world. When asked throughout my life, do I really believe in extraterrestrials, the answer has always been a definitive yes. Well, maybe not this kind of truth. Now, I do confess, I enjoy having fun with the subject as much as the next person. As a matter of fact, I think it's great. The aspect of entertaining UFOs publicity, in my opinion, is a good thing because it keeps the subject alive and in the public's imagination. A steady stream of books, magazines, movies, and television have kept the subject of alien invaders alive and in the spotlight for decades. For there is no such thing as bad press. Bela Lugosi, the definitive Count Dracula, checked himself into a rehab facility for morphine addiction toward the end of his life before it had become commonplace for celebrities to be hooked on drugs. His friend and agent, Edward D. Wood Jr., had a fit when he found Bela talking to the press about his addiction. But as Bela told the reporter, if people are talking about you, it means that you haven't been forgotten and are still in the spotlight. Lugosi was absolutely right. Today, Bela is remembered even more than Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr. as the all-time horror icon of cinematic history. Fact is, if it weren't for the sensationalism of UFOs, many would choose to forget the subject altogether. Roswell, New Mexico would still be an unknown desert town no one would have ever heard of. Today, the city thrives on the subject of UFOs and alien beings. But now back to a more slightly serious note. I, among with millions of others, of intellectual individuals, staunchly believe that our world has been visited for thousands of years by superior beings, and that the 1947 Roswell crash was, and remains to this day, one of the greatest cover-ups in U.S. history of the 20th century. Thankfully, in today's world of nonstop news and YouTube disclosure, people from all around the country and the globe give their all to expose the truth. While other countries are loosening up on the subject of extraterrestrials visiting our planet and have begun to open up their UFO files, slowly sharing them with the public, the U.S. continues to deny that such events have actually taken place. The proof of other intelligent life existence is beyond doubt. Take the pre-Roswell crash at Cape Girardeau, Missouri in the spring of 1941. When the Reverend Huffman was hastily called for spiritual representation at what was thought to be a plane crash. Turns out it wasn't a plane crash at all, but an alien ship filled with beings very similar to the ones found in New Mexico. covered up much quicker than Roswell and held a lot quieter under military silence. The most stunning evidence from the crash comes from a 1942 presidential memo noting how materials discovered in the crash would greatly aid in the development of a super weapon of war. The fact that the Roswell incident remains the most famous incident in history doesn't mean that the UFO phenomenon began in the 1940s. Oh dear me, no. The impact from extraterrestrial travelers has shaped civilization since prehistoric times. Primitive statues, artifacts, descriptions, cave drawings, stone carvings, and coins have evolved throughout history to reflect observations of recurrent contact with non-human visitors who travel to and from our world. Symbols on this hieroglyphic panel, made 4,000 years ago, clearly represent ancient vehicles which resemble modern helicopters, flying cars, spaceships, and jet fighters. With such profound proof, it is really hard to believe. Is it really hard to believe? Or is the better question, is it all that hard not to believe? Historical records from cultures living in all corners of the world tell the same story. That in a distant past, various godlike individuals from various planetary systems possess great power and astounding technology, including the ability to fly with the greatest of ease. It is also clear that these individuals help mold mankind into its present form. Floating craft with mysterious lights have been reported and recorded for posterity throughout the ages. Ancient inhabitants of cultures worldwide worship divine floating angels. Unmolested Hebrew scriptures from the Old Testament record divine skyborne vehicles, including the tale of Enoch, who tells of flying machines. Ezekiel, who describes a heavenly chariot belonging to the gods. That could suddenly appear over a place, hover for a time, and then disappear out of sight. The book of Genesis is based on ancient Sumerian texts. When translated, describe Anunnaki gods, giants named the Nephilim, who hovered the earth with their fiery spacecraft. Wise lords who descended from the heavens to fly through the sky, chariots of the gods, and chariots of fire fill historical accounts from around the world. Depicted over and over wearing special helmets and goggles of an unknown ear devices. Many were recorded donning curious uniforms, described as celestial garments, which were studded with odd objects of an unknown function. images pertaining to the gods of iniquity were not simply fabrications of the imagination. They were treasured recordings of their past. This fellow looks just like an Apollo astronaut, does he not? Writers and theologians have speculated for centuries that such magnificent artifacts as the Great Pyramids, as well as other various stone structures and rock carvings throughout the world, could never have been fashioned without the assistance of advanced visitors from other worlds. For it is an undisputed fact primitive man did not possess the knowledge and technology required to create such wonders. The fantastic artwork of the Nazca lines in southern Peru are just another example of the testament to our ancient travelers, preserved since prehistory due to lack of rainfall and undiscovered until man had learned to fly all over again. They offer no other explanation than ancient landing sites made to be seen from high above, images created by celestial deities to guide their course of navigation. This one is apparently waving to craft soaring above the sky and is called the astronaut, which looks remarkably similar to this guy found thousands of years apart and a half a world away. Don't you think? A medieval tapestry from the 1300s depicts the Virgin Mary against the background, which is clearly a flying saucer. And here, another cherished work, a painting from the 15th century, shows the Mary in front of what is clearly a UFO just to her right, as the man is shielding his eyes along with his barking dog, who are looking up at the disc, throwing out large sparks. So why would anyone stick such a curious thing in the center of a masterpiece? The answer is very simple. It was there. They were there. The proof is everywhere and has been for centuries. Thanks to modern photographs, the proof continues, even from the far side of the moon. And now to the Old West and where I came into this picture. And what a wild West that it was. Years before anything powered by man soared across the airwaves, there were hundreds of newspaper accounts telling various stories of silver flying objects that floated through the clouds and left trails of smoke. The first hot air balloons appeared in the 1700s, and the Wright brothers flew their first plane in 1903. But the time between those events was flooded with descriptions of hovering vessels and filled with humanoid beings not of this earth. Airborne vessels with various multicolored lights were reported by thousands, many who signed sworn statements to the account throughout the Southwest following the Civil War. Witnessed moving through the sky from 5 to 200 miles an hour. The accounts were astonishing when you considered that the fastest mode of transportation at the time was a fast-moving steam locomotive which clacked along the tracks at a top speed of about 40 miles an hour. Man-made dirigibles didn't become known until the late 1800s. and even the most primitive airplanes were still years to come. Communication of that time was limited to telegraph, newspapers, and horseback, which took days, if not weeks, for news to be delivered. As unexplained sightings of these strange objects grew even more frequent. With no defining references, since the term flying saucer did not come into play until the 1940s, cowboys and farmers of the Old West described these flying machines with more familiar names, such as serpents and dragons, bowls, balloons, and cigars. According to the 1897 Farmer's Almanac, between April 13th and April 17th of 1897 alone, there were 38 reported sightings in 23 North Texas counties. And by the second half of the 19th century American West, encounters of this nature had become so common. The great airship mystery of 1896-1897 had began in 1896. The first documented sighting of the strange silver-colored airships took place during several nights in Sacramento, California, where hundreds of residents witnessed the spectacle with great clarity. Reported in the November 22nd San Francisco Call, a large oblong-shaped craft supplied with brightly colored electrical lights and a strange-looking manned crew were moving above the ground, and people from all over California, Oregon, and up to Washington witnessed these same flying lights and phantom airships. Continuous sightings also took place throughout Arizona, New Mexico, Kansas, and Nebraska. Then on April 17th came Aurora. As the story goes, there's been repeated sightings in the area for days. Located just 20 miles north of Fort Worth, Texas, at 6 a.m. on April 17, 1897, an out-of-control flying machine appeared streaking across the sky while leaving a trail of smoke. Sinking ever closer to the ground, it clipped the edge of a fast-moving windmill and slammed head